The large, bright room, furnished with expensive and beautiful furniture, was flooded with bright golden sunlight. The pink-haired girl thought that she was finally here. In front of her lay the guide to preparing children for entrance exams and the guide to the infrastructure of the Academy of Magic. The girl thought that if this child successfully entered the academy, her work would be finished. She looked tenderly at the child, who was sleeping, hugging a toy and tightly clasping the girl's hand. The heroine's second thought was that she would thus avoid a possible future execution. Lost in thought, she was caught off guard by the question of whether Leon had fallen asleep yet. It was Mr. Wald, who had approached unnoticed, the one whom the girl considered her future executioner. Mr. Wald leaned over the bed to make sure the boy was fast asleep. The man looked at the girl and put his finger to his lips, calling for silence. The final exam was expected tomorrow, Mr. Wald reminded. Yes, the girl confirmed, pressing her hand to her chest. As Leon's governess, she intended to do everything possible to ensure that the boy succeeded. The boy was fast asleep, hugging his toy. Like a governess, Mr. Wald said thoughtfully, and the girl did not understand what he wanted to say. He took her by the chin and touched her lips, calling her by name, Adira Sasha. He said that starting from tomorrow she would become his wife, and with these words he approached to kiss the girl. She was completely shocked by his words, and actions becoming his wife was not at all part of her plans. Her hand was still held captive by the sweetly sleeping child. It all started a few months ago with an open dresser drawer. The box was completely empty, and the girl fell to her knees, sobbing because everything was gone, everything she had accumulated over a long time. There was only hatred in her green eyes. When she finally raised her head, she knew what kind of bastards did this. These people, who were sitting at the ceremoniously laid table in the great hall, were surprised by her appearance. "Where is my money?" Adira exclaimed. The woman sitting at the table covered her mouth with a handkerchief and said that since they were having lunch, Adira needed to behave decently. The girl saw the box, the very one she couldn't find in her drawer. "Are you talking about this?" The young man who was holding her in his hands asked mockingly. "Ah!" Adira couldn't help but let out an excited cry. She rushed towards the young man to take the box away. She shouted for her brother to give it to her, but he only held his hand as far away as possible so that she could not reach it. He said that Adira had recently started to behave rather brazenly, secretly saving up her pocket money, and from that day on, it was as if she had been replaced. The brother suggested that Adira was probably stealing this money from the family budget. According to him, she took on the essence of her biological mother, a commoner. Adira could only stare at him silently, gritting her teeth. She desperately earned and saved this money to get out of this damn house. She did translations, sewed, kept records. She looked at her brother with hatred and demanded that he return everything to her immediately. The young man clearly did not expect such an answer. Suddenly, wine spilled out of the glass and Adira heard an order to close her mouth. The girl looked at her second offender with wide eyes. It was a girl with purple hair, and she asked if Adira wanted to get something back, and then added that there was nothing in this house that belonged to her. The girl leaned over Adira, grabbed her by the hair and looked into her eyes, and asked if she had already forgotten about this, "You vile rat." No one sitting at that table was going to come to her aid, but they only told her to stop flaunting her dirty nature and get out. Adira realized that these people were not only going to take her property, they wanted to take her life. They dumped all the hardest and dirtiest work around the house on her. But Adira will not allow herself to be used like this any longer, so she will change this fate. As expected, everyone was still fast asleep in the early morning, and the servants would probably think that Adira had gone out on business, of which she always had plenty. No one paid attention to her departure, to the fact that she took her travel bag with her. The girl resolutely walked away from this house and thought that she, of course, felt very sorry for Adira Sasha. But the time has come to break her ties with her family. A year ago, on the day a girl was pushed down the stairs by her half-brother and sister, everything changed. She remembered everything. This whole world was just a novel that existed in her past life. She herself used to be an ordinary office worker, but suddenly turned into Adira Sashi, a minor character in this story. Speaking of her, it was necessary to mention one man, the current head of the accursed dukes, whose name was Wald Schwarzschild. He was the hero of the Empire, an invincible general. And at the same time, he had a reputation as a cold-blooded and merciless demon, and he was the final boss of this novel. Adira walked out onto a country road and was able to stop a cart to ask for a ride. She sat in the carriage and thought about Wald, who was said to have killed his brother and his wife to become the head of the family. And then Adira Sasha killed Schwarzschild's nephew. She was executed for this. At least that was the case in the novel, which remained in another world. Now the girl was heading to this man's mansion. She wondered how Adira had ever become a governess in the Schwarzschild family. She was a quiet and shy character. She did not have the strength to object to her older brother and sister. How could she suddenly start bullying a child? There were a lot of unrevealed moments in the book, but now Adira thought that if she didn't touch Leon, she could probably avoid execution. Working as a governess in the Duke's family was too tempting an offer to pass up. She was going to work hard to accumulate a fortune. She will put aside money for her services. The door to the mansion was opened by a young man who seemed to Adira to be an extremely cute butler. The girl greeted him and told him her name, and the butler asked her what business she had come for. The girl apologized for the sudden visit and explained that she had simply learned that the house needed a governess. The butler asked her in amazement how she knew this. Adira replied that she had heard some rumors, and she understood that now she would have to lie. She handed the butler a sealed envelope and said that if he didn't mind, she could help with the matter. Although the Duke's family was respected, people feared them and called them the Cursed. Adira understood why others were afraid to work here. But compared to the execution and life in that damn house, Adira wasn't that scared, so she followed the butler into the house. The rumors of a curse were just nonsense. Having opened the envelope, the butler examined the contents with surprise. He asked again if she really was from the academy. The list of merits looked quite impressive. Yes, Adira was quite strong in magic, so much so that she could even lift the curse from the family. But, the butler said, and looked at the girl, and she thought that she shouldn't arouse suspicion. It was not the right time to make mistakes, so Adira asked if she could meet Leon at least once. Then the butler could decide whether to hire her or not when he saw the boy's reaction to her. This sounded quite convincing, and the butler said that he would call him now. It was very good that Adira as a character was so talented. Now it was necessary to do everything to use her talents properly. First of all, it was necessary to befriend Leon so that she would be hired. By the way, the novel described Leon very little, so she knew almost nothing about his appearance or character. Now she was interested in what he would turn out to be like. The butler announced that Lord Leon had arrived. Adira curtsied and said with a smile that it was a pleasure to meet him. Hearing nothing in response, the girl looked up. "Lord Leon?" Adira asked again in surprise. In front of her stood a child, whose face was hidden by a lion cub mask. "Oh!" the child exclaimed and jumped in surprise. "Oh no," Adira thought fearfully. She had accidentally raised her voice too much. But the lion's hat that the boy was wearing surprised her very much. She thought it was very cute and said out loud that the hat was wonderful. Adira reached out to touch the lion's mane. The boy pushed her hand away. "Oh!" the girl said in surprise. The child's face reflected obvious fear. A moment later, he ran away screaming. "Ah, what!" Adira exclaimed after him, but she couldn't hold the boy back. "Ah," again, the maids sighed behind her. They thought that this time, too, nothing had worked out. Adira would very much like to know what exactly was going on here. The butler bowed and apologized to Lady Sasha. She asked if she had frightened the little lord. "No," the butler replied, explaining that Lord Leon was simply very shy. None of the previously hired teachers were able to find an approach to him. The entrance exams to the academy were coming soon, and the butler admitted that they were all confused. Adira noted with surprise that there were tears in the interlocutor's eyes. Because of all these rumors about the Duke's cursed house, no one wanted to come here, and those who did decide to, immediately abandoned for Adira's own plans. This state of affairs was simply an ideal arrangement. If she becomes friends with Leon, she will be able to secure her future and financial stability. Adira asked the butler for permission to spend time with Lord Leon. She said that she would try to make him open up. "Okay," the butler answered her. Although he still doubted that any good would come of all this, he understood that at first everyone is full of enthusiasm, but then quickly gives up. This lady was the same. Adira said she wasn't sure it would work, but she was going to keep trying to get him to talk until she got results. The girl's eyes were shining. The butler looked at her in amazement and sighed. Adira walked slowly down the corridor, looking around and wondering where the boy could be. Suddenly she noticed something. The child hid under the table. It seemed that this was his hiding place. The girl leaned over and approached the little lord with an offer to chat. She gave her name, but the boy mumbled something unintelligible in response. He crawled out from under the table and started running again, screaming. Adira thought that he was even running away cutely. So small and so nimble, she tried to find him again, calling out loudly. The girl walked through the entire mansion, even looking into the kitchen in her search. But the boy hid from her so masterfully that it was impossible to find him. Eventually, Adira came out into a garden with neatly trimmed bushes, marble stairs, a fountain, and an elegant gazebo. Adira wondered anxiously what would happen if she never found the boy. Suddenly, the girl's eyes widened in fear. In front of her stood a dog with 3 heads. It was Cerberus. It seems that Leon's pursuit has activated the mansion's security system, and now the Cerberus's glittering eyes are staring at Adira. The creature seemed very fierce to the girl, and she became worried whether Leon was really okay. The boy in the lion's cap was hiding behind the 3-headed dog. He was clearly not afraid of it. On the contrary, he was counting on the dog to protect him, and the dog's face clearly showed that it was not worth even trying to approach. Adira thought with a smile that this Cerberus was tame, which meant that she knew what to do with it. The girl sat down on the grass and turned to the dog, asking if Cerberus was Leon's friend, and then said that she also wanted to be friends with him. Cerberus's eyes followed her without stopping. Adira asked him if he would let her join. To the dog's amazement, the girl extended her hand towards him. A moment later, Adira was hugging a dog that clearly recognized her as a good person to play with. The whole secret was in a drop of her favorite magical aroma that was capable of turning even a Cerberus into a charming puppy. But after paying too much attention to the dog, Adira lost sight of Leon, and the boy ran away again. The boy hid in the thick bushes and was now sitting there. He hoped that the stranger would not be able to get in here. Only Leon dropped his hat, and now it was lying on the grass. The dog bent down to sniff the cap and pick up the scent. He caught a whiff of Lord Leon's scent and grabbed the cap in his teeth. The dog loved this smell. All 3 of his heads wanted to carry the hat in their mouths. Each head began to pull the cap towards itself, and eventually it tore. "Oh no," the boy cried, noticing that the cap had fallen off. "Kenny," the boy muttered resignedly. The torn cap lay next to the Cerberus' clawed paws. The pink-haired girl and the butler approached. "Lord Leon?" Adira exclaimed joyfully, convinced that she had found the boy again. Only Leon stood there, completely confused over his torn cap. Adira and her companion looked at the boy in alarm. He burst into tears and said he hated Kenny. Then Leon shouted that he hated everyone and that no one should dare come near him. He locked himself in his room, and even notes appeared on the door with orders not to enter and stay away. Adira, the butler, and all the maids gathered in front of this door. A bright golden light filled everything around, as if illuminating the luxurious furnishings of the mansion. The torn cap was handmade by Leon's mother. This is how the butler explained everything that was happening. He also said that Leon once had a lot of stuffed toys. Then Leon's parents, the former Duke and Duchess, died in a fire at their mansion 2 years ago. His uncle, Mr. Wald, took the boy in and became the head of the family at such an early age. Adira thought that the original version of the novel she read barely touched on the topic of Leon's parents, and that's why she never paid attention to it, even though Leon lost everyone he loved. The girl touched the cap and thought how dear it must be to him. The butler said that Lord Leon used to be a very cheerful and friendly child, but after the fire, he became very withdrawn. Adira hugged her hat to her chest and thought about what it was like to be alone, with no one to rely on. She was familiar with this feeling, because in her past life she was Sheena Kaoru, who also lost her parents in early childhood. She was wrong. Chasing Leon would achieve nothing. Such a child cannot be simply forced to open up under pressure. Adira asked to be allowed to try to fix the thing. She didn't know if the boy would ever be the same again, but she had to bring back the little that allowed him to remember his wonderful past. Adira explained her request by saying that she simply wanted Lord Leon to feel better. This proposal pleased all the other servants, so each one expressed a desire to help, and the butler said that the necessary patterns would certainly be found in the pantry. Adira was very happy and grateful to everyone for their enthusiasm. The patterns for the toys were indeed found in the storage room. Looking at these patterns, Adira could imagine how much love had been put into each piece. Adira took up her sewing. The rest of the servants helped her, making parts for the toys. Adira thought about Leon. The boy didn't need to be afraid. He wasn't alone. At this time, the boy was sitting in his room on the bed, covering his head with a blanket. He imagined people saying that if he was wearing something weird, he must have gone completely out of control. It was such a disappointment to them. Leon guessed that this new stranger thought exactly the same thing. Suddenly, Leon felt as if he noticed something. He became curious about what was happening outside the door of his room. Still wrapped in the blanket, Leon cautiously peered out the door. There sat a teddy bear looking at the boy. "Mommy's toy," Leon said, picking up the teddy bear. He saw that further down the corridor, at a distance from each other, there were more stuffed animals sitting. Leon asked if they had all returned to him and went from toy to toy, collecting them. Holding a full armful of stuffed animals, he reached the final point of the route. He was simply amazed by what he saw there. There was a table set with food on it and his lion hat lying on it. The boy happily grabbed her and hugged her tightly. He also saw a card on the table, on which was written a request that Lord Leon accept this apology. Leon sat in a chair, surrounded by his toys, and read the message. Adira wanted to know if the boy had left his room. The butler happily reported to her that he had gone out and even sat down to dinner. The maids noted that Lady Adira was extremely clever. The idea to attract him with the smell of food without catching the boy's eye was excellent. They would never have thought of such a thing. She also recreated his precious toys. Lord Leon was probably very happy. Adira assured that all this was possible only thanks to their help, and even though these were not the same toys as before. But one could hope that the boy would understand their feelings. Suddenly they saw Lord Leon, wearing a new cap, peering through the half-open door. The boy rushed to Adira to hug her, thank her. He called her his teacher. He said that he really liked the toys. Adira crouched down to look the boy in the eye. She said she was glad to hear that, and then thanked Lord Leon for coming out to her. She explained that she couldn't have done it alone. They were all here working on this toy, and now the boy, embarrassed, thanked everyone. The servants and the butler were extremely moved, almost to tears. The three-headed dog lay sadly to the side. Leon came closer to him and touched his nose. "Kenny, I'm sorry for what I said then," the boy said. Cerberus happily began to lick the boy's face, continuing to arouse affection in everyone around him. Suddenly, one of the maids ran through the door. She had some urgent news. She announced that the Duke would soon arrive home. Adira thought about the Duke with excitement. On this sunny day, the city looked very peaceful and cozy. One of the knights in armor said that 2 years had passed since his last visit here. The knight in the blue cloak, who was also sitting on a horse, was Duke Wald. He took off his helmet. His face did not at all glow with joy at his return. "Yes," he said, looking straight ahead. At this time, news arrived at the mansion that Mr. Wald was returning after 2 years of absence. There was a terrible bustle in the mansion in anticipation of this event. Little Leon sat in a chair, watching everyone tidy up. Adira thought that with such a commotion, the boy would not be able to concentrate on his studies. "Mr. Leon," she called out to him. Adira asked if he would mind giving her a little tour of the house. The boy asked if she was sure he should do it, and Adira explained that he was a master of hide-and-seek, and there was no one who knew the best places in this mansion better than him. The boy obviously liked this proposal very much and enthusiastically agreed. Leon waved his flag and announced that he would give teacher Adira a real tour. He walked briskly down the main corridor of the mansion, and Adira followed him. First, he led her into a large and bright kitchen. Leon said that the food prepared here is very tasty. Then they came to a beautifully furnished room, which Leon called his own. Adira thought it was 10 times bigger than hers. Leon walked up to the closet and, putting his finger to his lips, opened the door. Inside, under the hanging clothes, there was a bed for stuffed animals. Leon explained that they were sleeping now, and this was his secret base. Leon leaned closer to Adira and whispered that it was a secret for everyone, but she could know it. The girl admitted that it was a great honor for her. After this, the boy took her to a gallery where there were many paintings on the walls. He said that these were portraits of his family. One of the paintings depicted a 3-headed elderly dog. Leon said that it was Kenny's grandfather. The Schwarzschild ducal family was famous for its magic, and all the heads of this family were always among the best graduates of the academy. Wald, now the head of the family, has shown unique abilities in swordsmanship and magic, which has allowed him to win many victories. No one in the Empire can surpass him. The family of the final boss of this story is full of unique individuals, but Wald stands out even among them. Leon froze in front of one of the portraits, looking at it with a special look. He said that this portrait depicts his dad. Adira remembered that Hesiod, the boy's father, was barely mentioned in the original plot of the book. But judging by the character's memories, it was often said about him that he was a generous man who never refused to help anyone. He was idolized, called an angel in the flesh. He was the complete opposite of Wald, who inspired only fear in everyone. Lord Hetzion was an outstanding mage and a man with a big heart. Adira stated that it was safe to say that Leon had adopted these traits. Turning to the boy, Adira said that she was looking forward to their manifestation. Then they came to a luxurious door with blue curtains. Leon said this was Duke Wald's office. Adira saw how the boy's face changed at these words. She asked what was wrong. He answered that the Duke would arrive soon. Adira understood that Wald had not been here for a long time, and she asked if Leon was not happy about his arrival. The boy tried to explain something, but could only utter a few incoherent words and burst into tears. Leon looked so scared that Adira didn't know how to comfort him. After the fire, Wald left the house. Leon probably thinks the Duke hates him. Adira thought that in her past life she had been in exactly the same situation. She was a little girl standing by the grave and watching the people walking away. Now she couldn't just tell Leon that everything would be fine, that he didn't need to worry, because she didn't know what was really on Duke Wald's mind. After all, if it later turns out that she lied, it will only make the child's loneliness even more unbearable. So Adira looked at the boy and said that she herself would be seeing Lord Wald for the first time, so she was very nervous. Leon wondered if his teacher was nervous too, and Adira assured him that she was very much so. She was really scared of this meeting with Wald. If she did something wrong, she could be executed at any moment. But when she saw Leon shaking and getting nervous, she couldn't just stand there and do nothing. Adira was going to do everything she could. She had to at least try, so she suggested that Leon practice greeting with her, because if it was her with the boy, it would be much easier for him. Leon was surprised, but immediately agreed to rehearse. He stopped being sad because he and his teacher Adira had a plan ready. Snow-white doves were flying in the clear sky. Several days had passed since the news was received. The butler greeted Mr. Wald, who had returned home. The Duke, wearing a fluttering black cloak, walked down the corridor between rows of servants bowing low before him. The Duke gave off a very oppressive, dark aura. Adira stood in the row of servants, also bowing, and thought that they had trained carefully. Together with Leon, they practiced bows and curtsies. Kenny played the role of Wald, and Leon learned to greet him. And as the Duke walked down the corridor, the girl was sure that everything would be fine. She thought about Mr. Leon, but the boy was very scared, and from his fear he again froze like a statue. The Duke's steps were getting closer. He soon caught up with Adira and looked at them darkly. The atmosphere was absolutely terrible. "Leon," said the Duke, looking at the boy. The boy's eyes were completely frightened. He continued to hide behind Adira, clinging to her skirt with all his strength. The Duke coldly asked how much longer Leon would wear this hat. Adira hastened to stand up for the boy and explained that this hat was very dear to the little lord. She explained that she believed that when his heart found true peace, she believed that the time would come to take off his cap, but for now the Duke must try to simply understand it. "And who are you?" asked the Duke, turning his gaze to the girl. She looked into his cold eyes and asked for forgiveness. Then Adira curtsied and explained that she served as the little lord's governess, and her name was Adira Sasha. The Duke's gaze, directed at the girl, was difficult to read. The butler explained that this was Count Sasha's daughter, and that she had come here voluntarily for the sake of Mr. Leon. The Duke looked at the girl even more closely. The boy continued to hide behind her skirt. "The governess, then," Wald said, and ordered her to come to his office later, and then he turned around and walked away. In his chambers, the Duke changed his clothes and talked with the butler. He noted that Leon had grown a lot during his absence. The butler said that he would soon be 5 years old. Wald noted that the hat seemed to have been made when Leon was still a baby, and he expressed concern that the boy would soon simply outgrow it. The butler explained that Mr. Wald no longer had to worry about it, because Lady Adira had recently adjusted it, correcting the size. The butler assured that this was the first time that Mr. Leon had become so attached to the teacher, and he simply blossomed. The Duke said not to trust her. He ordered to watch the girl, and if she did anything suspicious, to immediately inform him. His gaze at these words was stern and cold. At this time, Leon, huddled into a ball, sat on the bed in his room. Adira looked at him and thought that this was very bad. Leon had again completely closed himself off. She turned to look at Cerberus, who was also watching what was happening. There was understanding on the dog's face. Adira sat down on the bed next to the boy and told him that it was completely normal that he was nervous, because after all, such a meeting took place 2 years ago. Leon turned around, his eyes full of tears. He said that the Duke looked angry. Adira said that everything was fine, because she was here. Kenny was here too. He even brought Mr. Leon all his plush toys. They were all together. "That's it," Leon repeated and looked at the teacher. Adira noticed that although Lord Wald's expression was angry, it was probably his usual face. This thought puzzled Leon. Now that teacher Adira said this, the boy remembered Wald's face when he saw him before, so it seemed like the truth. Adira thought it would be better to clear things up today while there was still time, and she suggested that Lord Leon go and meet the Duke again. The boy was scared and excited, but he agreed. He was going to tell Mr. Wald welcome home. Now he could do it. Good girl, Adira was delighted with the boy's decision. It was already evening. It was completely dark outside the windows, but the lights were on in the mansion. The butler stood next to Lord Wald in his office, thinking about little Lord Leon, who must be feeling depressed right now after all. He had been practicing his greeting so hard. At the very least, there was some way to show Duke Wald how hard Leon had tried. The butler tried to attract the Duke's attention. At that moment, the door to the office opened, and an apologetic voice was heard, which announced that they had come to greet Mr. Wald. The Duke looked up from his papers and ordered the visitors to enter. Adira and an embarrassed Leon walked into the office. The Duke looked at them with the same cold expression. This look obviously frightened the boy. But Adira looked at him encouragingly and held one of his plush toys in her hands. "You can do it," her eyes said. "Duke Wald," the boy said, stuttering slightly, coming close to the table. It wasn't the first time, but he finally managed to close his eyes and say the greeting they had been practicing for so long, but he still stumbled at the beginning of the phrase, and this worried Adira. "Yes, I am back," said the Duke. Adira hastened to hug the embarrassed child and thanked the Duke for his attention. She whispered to Leon that he was doing well, but the boy was worried that he was stuttering again. A small mistake, in Adira's opinion, didn't count at all. It was still very cute. The Duke looked at them and told Leon to come to the training ground tomorrow. Adira couldn't understand why the training ground was needed, what the Duke had in mind, but she still had to thank him for taking the time to look after the child, and Adira assured him that Lord Leon would definitely come tomorrow, and also said a big thank you. The Duke ordered Theo, the butler, to take Leon to his room. He ordered the governess to remain in the office. "Yes," said Adira, looking at the Duke. The girl was left alone in a closed room with her future executioner. If she made one wrong move, not only her work here would be in jeopardy, but her life itself could end. She needed to behave as carefully as possible. Wald said he felt like Leon had become attached to his new teacher. Adira answered honestly that not quite yet. Then Wald asked her directly what kind of magic she used for this. The girl assured that she did not use any magic at all. Wald countered that it had been unthinkable before that Leon would voluntarily open up to anyone. Adira said she just tried to talk to him as best she could. The Duke looked at her very gloomily. Adira understood that if she tried to deceive him or use special powers, she could say goodbye to her life. Getting rid of someone like her was easy. The girl felt such pressure. The Duke was absolutely serious, but she simply couldn't back down now. She said that her soul became calmer. She understood why Duke Wald wanted to punish those who harmed the young lord, because the safety of Lord Leon was above all else. As Lord Leon's governess, Adira was willing to devote herself to guiding him to the future he dreamed of, even if it meant sacrificing her own life. The Duke replied that these were just words. He crossed his arms over his chest and stated that he didn't know Adira yet, but if she was going to stay here, she had to show what she was capable of. If not, then she could leave immediately. The girl understood that this was a test for the position. After all, it would have been stupid to hire a governess just because Leon liked her. Wald had every right to doubt. Adira said she agreed and asked what her first task would be. Wald replied that Leon needed to be forced to pass the test of the scales. Adira understood what he was trying to achieve. The scale test was a test for children who had reached a certain age. The test required obtaining the scales of a sacred dragon. It is a test of magic, swordsmanship, wisdom, and courage. Only the child who has obtained the dragon scale has the right to take the entrance exam to the academy. Every child from a noble family goes through this test, and it is not easy for the parents either. In other words, passing this exam was an inevitable event in the life of a noble offspring. Wald said that Leon should be accepted into the academy. Adira thought that a huge responsibility was falling on her. She thought with annoyance that she had been reborn into a very strange novel. She did not understand what to do. She had not thought before that there were dragons here. Although Adira as a character had already gone through this test and entered the academy, it was simply necessary to teach the boy what her own past version had already experienced. "Yes, sir," the girl said out loud and assured that she would make sure that Lord Leon passed this exam. "We'll see," Wald responded, still skeptical. Theo's butler hastened to assure the Duke that Lady Adira was a person of outstanding ability and could be relied upon. The girl thought Theo was a very nice guy. The next day, a training ground awaited them. Adira, Wald, Theo, and Leon came there together. "Ha!" Adira exclaimed and demonstrated her own magic. She managed to hit the target with magical fire. The Duke looked at this with an inscrutable expression, but Theo and Leon were delighted by such a demonstration of abilities. Adira suggested that Lord Leon also try to hit the target, but the boy clearly did not share this enthusiasm. Adira approached the boy and said that there was no need to worry, he just needed to focus on the target. Then the girl showed which one she wanted the boy to show her what he was capable of. The girl thought that even though he was very young, he still came from a family of geniuses, and she was sure that everything would work out. Leon closed his eyes and screamed, putting his palms out in front of him. Only a few vague sparks swirled in front of the boy. Adira looked at what was happening with surprise. The boy was completely discouraged by the failure, so Adira assumed that his magic was not in its best form today. She suggested that they take up fencing instead, so Leon was given a wooden sword. The boy needed to attack the target with this sword. But Leon looked at the spinning target and thought that he didn't want to hurt even this dummy. He even mentally asked him for forgiveness. And yet, with a cry, Leon tried to go on the attack. Both Theo and Adira watched this attack with bewilderment. Soon the wooden sword was knocked out of the boy's hand. "Oh!" Leon cried as the sword flew away from him. Adira watched him with fear. "Careful!" Theo cried out anxiously. Frightened, Leon closed his eyes tightly. Adira rushed to his aid and managed to protect him from the sword falling towards him. Leon could only watch in horror with his eyes wide open. The girl hugged the boy tenderly and asked if he was hurt. She was glad that it was just a training sword. Theo thought with excitement that they were very lucky that everything had been resolved so easily. Wald covered his eyes with his hand. A moment later, he looked at Adira and Leon through his fingers. Leon was very frightened by this icy gaze. After this, the Duke turned around abruptly. "Enough," he threw over his shoulder, already leaving. Adira thought with annoyance that perhaps the young lord had failed today, but she still did not understand why he had to behave so rudely. Adira looked at the boy carefully and called out his name. Leon was crying again, and she thought he was upset because it must have been too scary to show off all his skills in public. However, he plucked up his courage and did it anyway. There was still plenty of time before the test, and Adira decided that she couldn't give up. "Mr. Leon," she said, looking into his eyes. She squeezed his hands in hers and said that they were all newbies once. No need to apologize for that. Adira told Leon that from this moment on he would grow above himself along with her. She wanted to make the Duke admit how wonderful Leon was. At this time, Wald was walking away at a quick pace, and Theo was trying not to lag too far behind him. The butler thought that perhaps his master seemed upset by this outcome. The Duke called out to Theo and told him to hold on. The butler froze, looking at his palms. It was a very small jar of ointment. Wald ordered it to be applied to Leon's wounds. Theo remembered that the boy had a cut on his palm. He just couldn't believe that the Duke had managed to notice such a small thing. Theo was delighted by such care and tried to express this to the Duke, but he only told him to move on. Then the butler reminded her that Lady Adira could also have been injured while protecting the boy, and he asked if he could offer the potion to her as well. The Duke, without turning around, told the butler to do as he saw fit. Theo met Adira and Leon already in the corridor of the mansion. With a bow, he handed them a jar of ointment, saying that it was a gift from the Duke. Adira looked at the jar with surprise. She thought that Wald had simply gotten angry and left. The girl thanked Theo and said that she was just about to examine Mr. Leon's abrasion. The butler looked at the girl and smiled. He said that she could use the ointment too, and Adira looked at her hand and understood what he meant. Leon grabbed the teacher's skirt. He was very worried, because it was his fault that she got hurt. Adira wondered if Wald was so concerned about this matter. Then it meant that he was worried about them. Theo said that from now on they should prepare hard for the exam. He believed that the Duke was very worried about entering the academy. He heard that Adira's relatives also distinguished themselves with their talents. So Theo was confident that the boy's new teacher would succeed. Leon himself stood to the side the whole time, his eyes downcast. He walked slowly towards the garden. Leon walked along the sunlit path. Suddenly he noticed a squirrel in the branches and greeted it. The little animal peered curiously out of the hollow and looked very cute. As he moved down the tree trunk closer to the boy, Leon asked if he could chat with him. The leaves swirled in the gentle gusts of wind. The squirrel looked with interest at the treats that the boy held out to her in his palm, and even tried to grab his finger with her teeth. Leon climbed onto a tree branch and told his new friend that he was very ashamed, because today he had disgraced himself in front of Wald. Remembering how the Duke left, Leon thought that he was clearly disappointed. Of course, Adira said that everything would be fine, and Leon tried to believe it. But he couldn't use his own sword or magic properly, and he doesn't know how to do anything at all. After all, there were evil people who shouted at him to hit harder, to use attack magic. But Leon could only curl up into a ball of horror. Leon thought he wanted to go to the academy like his dad, but he just couldn't. The squirrel put his paws on the boy's hat. Leon sat sadly on a tree branch. Adira suddenly noticed that the boy had disappeared again. She met Wald, and he also wanted to know where Leon was. Adira said that the boy was walking in the garden and thanked the Duke for the ointment. To this, the Duke made no reply. Adira thought he was a man of few words. Wald said he wanted Leon to learn magic. He stated that this would clearly not hinder the boy, and he could learn a lot from Adira. Adira didn't understand how he could draw any conclusions from just one spell. The girl had been practicing magic ever since she was reborn, and the real Adira has been doing this her whole life. Wald recalled that the girl said that she would help Leon pass the exam, but so far there were no results in sight. It seemed like he thought Adira would give in. Any other teacher would have given in, but she had already made up her mind. The girl said that the training is still ongoing. The Duke thought about her words. He waved his hand towards the girl, but she did not understand what this gesture meant. He seemed to mean that she needed to sit down somewhere, and the girl sank down onto the sofa. "May I ask a question?" the Duke said, staring at her. Adira couldn't understand why he was looking at her like that. It was some kind of pressure. The girl sighed and touched her hand, which hurt slightly. Wald looked at her, crossing his arms over his chest. The Duke's gaze was incredibly skeptical. He told her to do everything quickly, and Adira said okay and thanked him. Adira knew that many aristocratic families were eager for their offspring to enter the academy, and many of them hire various teachers and coaches. Adira had heard that the Duke had hired teachers for Lord Leon before. Now she wanted to understand why she was so eager for the boy to enter the academy. Wald replied that the connections he made there would one day become a saving shield and weapon. It is a natural practice for any guardian to create a favorable social circle for the ward because his life depends on it. Wow, Adira thought. She had previously thought that this admission was so necessary for the Duke because of stereotypes, but everything turned out much better, although the girl was still not sure of Wald's true motives. After all, the Duke was cold-blooded and stingy with emotions. This was worth keeping in mind. Adira thought that she couldn't make mistakes. A whole meeting was going on in her head about this. She reminded herself that she had assured herself that she would take care of everything, but now she didn't know what to do. Even if I continued teaching Leon attack magic, it was useless. But Adira was determined to take on any challenge, no matter how difficult, and she didn't want to go back to her parents' house after all this. The girl still knew so little about Lord Leon, what he liked, what not. If she knew more, she could get hints for his training. But she didn't know how to ask him. It was impossible to act directly. Suddenly, the girl heard someone scream and saw Theo, who had fallen and scattered a lot of books. He asked Lady Adira for forgiveness, and she asked if he was hurt. She picked up one of the books and saw from the cover that it was a children's book. Adira thought that Theo probably had younger brothers and sisters. She opened the book and read what was inside. There was exactly what she needed. Adira was very happy and asked Theo for permission to take these books. The butler was surprised. He did not understand why she needed this. The girl replied that now he would help her, and then she would repay him. Adira found Leon's drooping figure in the room near the window. "Good morning, Mr. Leon," said the girl. He saw teacher Adira entering his room with a book and greeted her. The girl said that Mr. Wald told her to practice magic with him yesterday. Now they can work together to pass the exam. "Okay," Leon said dejectedly. He thought that he didn't know what to do, because maybe if he failed the exam, teacher Adira would get into trouble because of him. Adira said that there would be no intensive training today. The boy was surprised to hear this. Didn't the teacher come here to teach him? Instead, Adira said with a smile that they would rather play. She handed him the book and asked him to accept this gift from her. "Thank you very much," said Leon. Adira asked if he knew what an alphabet book was. It was a book with pictures. What Adira had given him was still a blank book, in which Leon would now draw his favorite things in order, starting with the letter A. This way they can create their own alphabet book. Leon said it looked much more interesting. "That's good," said Adira, and reported that she and Theo had also made the same book last night. He always carried one with him that had cute drawings of his younger brothers in it, which was the inspiration for making an alphabet book. Leon responded well to this idea, so Adira suggested to start quickly. She asked what was the boy's favorite thing that began with the letter A. The boy thought about it and, sitting down on the floor with a book, began to draw. Adira thought it might be an apple, or little children might also love ants. Soon he exclaimed that he had already drawn it and called Adira to him. Leon happily opened the book to the page with the letter A. There was a portrait of a girl with pink hair, and the boy said that it was Adira. It was so sweet that it struck Adira right in the heart. She said it was a great honor for her and also noted that Mr. Leon draws very well. She suggested moving on to the next picture and drawing something that starts with the letter B. Leon thought about it. The first thought that came to his mind was about Duke Wald. He was sure that if he drew Mr. Wald, he would definitely not like it. But the boy came up with another solution. He could draw Mr. Wald's horse. Looking at the drawn horse, Adira thought that the boy was embarrassed in front of Mr. Wald, but without saying anything, she suggested moving on to the next one. Then Leon drew a Cerberus, a deer, and an elephant. Taking the book, Adira and Leon went out into the garden. Wald, who was watching them from the window, asked the butler what they were doing. Theo explained that they were creating some sort of alphabet book, and it seemed like Mr. Leon was drawing his favorite things in it. Wald thought with surprise about Mr. Leon's favorite things. Soon they had covered almost the entire alphabet, and Adira was glad out loud that Mr. Leon had so many favorite things. The boy looked into her eyes and asked what teacher Adira liked. The girl thought about the answer to this question, what she really likes. When she was a child, she grew up in an institution, and when other children asked her, she always gave them everything, saying that she couldn't choose anyway. So Adira had never had to think about her favorite things before. Although she definitely liked Leon, she could tell him that with confidence. But she had other thoughts, that she wanted to make friends with the boy, but at the same time, inside her heart, there was a secret thought to avoid her own death. She could never tell Leon about these true thoughts. And Adira replied that nothing simply came to her mind. Then Leon demanded that teacher Adira give him his homework quickly. Adira laughed loudly, and they walked further into the garden holding hands. A squirrel jumped on Leon's head, and the boy explained that its house was in a tree nearby. Adira asked in surprise if this cute creature was Leon's friend and extended her hand, which the squirrel solemnly shook. The boy explained that the squirrel always listened to his stories. They decided that a squirrel would be a perfect fit for the next letter. They sat under a tree, and Adira watched with affection as Leon drew. Now he depicted a squirrel, and Adira thought about the fact that Mr. Leon, it turns out, loves animals. It was these that he drew with particular pleasure. Adira was very happy that she managed to learn something new about Leon over and over again. It would be great if this became a hint on how to teach the kid magic. They both didn't know that someone was watching them. It was the Duke looking gloomily at Adira and Leon. Meow, Adira suddenly heard. She turned around, trying to figure out what that sound was. The girl saw a big gray cat sitting on a tree. Even in appearance, the cat seemed angry. What to do? Adira thought. She really didn't want it to be a cat. It was her bad dream that came back to life. A childhood memory where she was suddenly attacked by a cat, and since then she had been very afraid of them. Suddenly, Adira realized that the cat was running towards her. The cat jumped. The girl barely managed to cover her head. Then the cat pushed off Leon's head with his paw and ran on. He jumped up another tree and stopped on a thick branch. Frightened, Leon saw what the cat was doing and screamed loudly. The cat grabbed the squirrel and was now squeezing it in his mouth. The cat raised its clawed paw over the frightened animal. The cat's gaze glowed yellow and he licked his lips. Then the cat raised its paw over the helpless victim. Oh no, Adira thought. This little squirrel was Leon's friend, and the boy himself also shouted that this shouldn't be done. A glowing, transparent bubble hid the squirrel and lifted it into the air right before the eyes of the confused cat. Adira also didn't understand what was happening. Could Leon, who stood with his eyes wide open and his palms raised, really do this? Could it be that this air magic belonged to this boy? Leon carefully took the balloon into his hands. The squirrel was rescued and completely unharmed. Leon was very glad that his friend remained safe. The boy handed the squirrel to Adira, who was concerned that the boy himself had gotten scratched. At that moment, the cat fell from the branch and hung there, barely holding on with her paws, meowing pitifully. "Careful!" Adira exclaimed, noticing this. Adira didn't know what to do because she herself was so afraid, but the cat's paw still slipped from the branch. Adira thought that she shouldn't be thrown like that and ran up, holding out her hands to catch the cat. But the cat was caught by a completely different person. His hands also caught the girl herself when she stumbled and almost fell. Adira stared wide-eyed at her savior. It turned out to be Duke Wald, who came to the rescue in time. He not only held the girl in his arms, but also looked straight into her eyes. Adira quickly pulled away from the Duke and asked for forgiveness. She felt embarrassed for causing the Duke inconvenience, and she was so frightened of this cat that she simply fell into a stupor. Leon also ran up to her to ask if Adira was okay. The Duke released the cat onto the ground. Adira assured Leon that she was fine. She asked Mr. Leon to explain to her better what kind of magic that had just happened. Wald asked the boy if he could use defensive magic. Adira looked at Leon with admiration. After all, the boy protected the squirrel with his strength. Adira thought that the fact that Leon used magic involuntarily meant that he had a talent for defensive magic. And if he can use it, then something else will work. The girl turned to Mr. Wald and said that she needed a minute of his attention. They went into the Duke's office and he asked if Adira had a secret method to pass the scale test. He wanted to know what it was. "That's right," Adira replied. She believed that with this method there would be no need to learn attack magic. Adira assumed that Mr. Leon had basic defensive magic skills, so this method would be perfect for them, but the Duke countered that it would be impossible to obtain the dragon scales using defensive magic. But Adira put her finger to her lips and said that it was still possible. She stood before the Duke and explained how she thought it could be done. After listening to her, the Duke became angry and exclaimed that this was a bad joke. Such a method would only disgrace Leon. Adira explained that this method is known to few, but eminent professors write about it as a technique used. For a moment, the Duke simply glared at the girl. Then Wald asked if Sir Ladora would accept such a technique. In fact, the dragon that appears at the scale test is a modified version of the Academy Teacher and Dragon Teacher, which was created by Sir Ladora. This is a measure to ensure the safety of children and to ensure that there are no violations or bias on the part of the judge. The Dragon Teacher worked even when Adira herself was a schoolgirl. Old age did not affect this mysterious person at all. Adira said that she heard that Sir Ladora also supported that method, so she thought that there would be no problems. She thought that the most important thing was that it would also be for the sake of Mr. Leon himself. Wald asked why she thought so. Adira said that Leon loved animals very much and was a very kind child in general, so she believed that his inability to use attack magic was due to the fact that he simply did not want to hurt anyone. The girl admitted that she would also feel sad if she had to force her child to do something he didn't like, so this was the only option left for them. The Duke looked at Adira and thought for a moment. Finally, he said that he understood everything and agreed. Adira thanked him very much. "I'm sorry," said Theo, frozen in the doorway. Adira turned around and noticed that the butler looked strange. The butler came closer to Mr. Wald to tell him something quietly. Wald's eyes suddenly widened. His impassive face still didn't convey anything clear, but Adira realized that he had been told something important. Immediately after this, the Duke turned to leave. Adira could only look at his back with incomprehension. Wald turned to face her after all. He ordered Adira to make Leon a master of defensive magic at all costs. The girl said that she understood everything, but the Duke left without listening to the end. Adira thought that for just a moment, the very air seemed to freeze in this room. She did not understand what had happened. Adira announced to Mr. Leon that from this day on, they would begin intensive training in defensive magic in all seriousness. Leon, Kenny, and the cat and squirrel listened to this statement very seriously. Adira thought that if he could protect himself and everyone around him without hurting anyone, Mr. Leon could become a very kind magician. Adira asked Leon to let him help so they could do it together, and the boy agreed. Leon hugged Kenny and asked if his friends would help him. All the animals responded with enthusiasm, and Leon said that he would try his best. Adira laughed and suggested starting with preparatory exercises. The magicians of this world are mostly aristocratic persons and people of noble origin. Besides them, there are many peaceful inhabitants who do not even have magical powers. There are also magical beasts that cause great damage, which can only be defeated by magicians. Heroes are those who perfectly master attack magic. They are like the saviors of the world, helping people. Only in the Schwarzschild family, generation after generation, outstanding magicians appeared who used this power, of which Wald's skill is considered the best of all time. Thanks to him, he was awarded the prestigious title of Sword of the Empire by the Imperial House. There were rumors about him that the Emperor himself feared him because he had incredibly powerful magic. Adira previously thought that she would teach Leon attack magic only because there was a prejudice that he was a child of the Schwarzschild family. She now understood that depending on how he used defensive magic, it could become his strongest weapon. Leon got her attention by telling her that he had already finished the exercises, so now it was time to try out the magic. Adira told Leon to concentrate on the feelings he had experienced while saving the squirrel. Then he had to try to put feelings similar to the previous ones into his energy. Kenny, the cat, and the squirrel looked at the boy carefully. Leon raised his palms in front of his face, his eyes shining with emotion. A circular bubble of energy appeared around Kenny and lifted the Cerberus into the air. "I did it!" Leon exclaimed joyfully. Adira was honestly delighted and told the boy to keep up the good work. Now he had to try to let go of the ball. Everything worked out. The happy dog rushed to lick Leon's face, and Adira said that she didn't think that the boy would be able to do it the very first time. It was just wonderful. Leon asked if it was possible to show such a successful result to Mr. Wald. Adira replied that it was a good idea to surprise him with the results of her efforts. Leon was very happy about this. Leon admitted that he wanted to show him his successes as soon as possible. In the book, Adira's fate was rather unenviable. She ended up in a cell, in rags, with her hands tied. Adira was crying, but no one paid attention to her tears and frightened look. She tried to explain to Mr. Wald that everything was completely different. When Adira dreamed about this, she woke up in horror. She didn't even immediately realize that it was just a dream. Adira sat up in bed, raising her head with difficulty. The last time she saw Wald's eyes, there was a mixture of hatred and contempt in his gaze. His intent to kill Adira was so strong that her heart almost stopped. It wasn't even a dream, but a vision of the last moment that Adira experienced. When the girl came to the mansion and talked to Wald in person, he behaved more reasonably than she thought, and did not even seem so cruel. Although in the book, Wald was portrayed as an incomprehensible monster willing to kill people without reason, and Adira would like to know why he was chosen as the final boss. Adira had spoken to him properly a few weeks ago. After that, Wald stopped appearing. Without even giving a reason, Adira knew nothing about him. She stood there, lost in thought, when she heard her name being called. It was Leon who called out to her and noticed that she didn't look well. He wanted to know if she was okay. "Oh, Mr. Leon," said the girl, and asked for forgiveness for being so deep in thought. She replied that she was fine. Leon thought that he would like to learn magic that increases energy. Suddenly an idea struck the boy. "Teacher, look," Leon exclaimed and showed what else he could do. He was delighted that the energy gave him the ability to rise into the air. Adira clapped her hands, admiring out loud, but she didn't really understand why he was being so abrupt. The boy asked if his teacher was feeling better now, and Adira realized that he was trying to cheer her up because he thought that if he showed her his new abilities, she would be happy. Indeed, when she saw how the boy was trying his best, she immediately felt much more cheerful. Adira thanked the boy and said that she was now full of energy. She had to try to avoid the ending she saw in the book anyway, and for that, Leon needed to move towards passing the exam at the academy and focus on the scale test. "How are you?" Theo asked Adira, suddenly approaching. Adira replied that thanks to his help everything was fine, then said that lately she had not seen Mr. Wald at all. She asked what he was doing. Theo replied that Mr. Wald had gone on an urgent business trip. Adira explained that Mr. Leon was simply eagerly awaiting his return. Theo looked up thoughtfully at the boy sitting on the branch. The butler said that his feelings were understandable. They were finally able to reunite after 2 years of separation, but even now the Duke had almost no time to talk. Adira agreed with this. Because the terrifying final boss is Leon's only family member, he must be lonely. The only thing she could do for him now was to protect him. Adira assured the boy that until Mr. Wald returned, she would be by his side and that he could rely on her. "Mrs. Adira," Theo exclaimed. Leon grabbed his teacher's hand tightly, and they headed down the path. Theo remained where he was and watched them go. It was already dark night over the old house. Duke Wald walked down the corridor of this house behind a nun who said that she could not believe that the Grand Duke's family had a head butler. She said that they should thank God that he was found. The nun said that 2 years ago he was suddenly left at the entrance. It was impossible to even establish contact with him. Wald looked at the man. He asked if it might have been forbidden magic, but the nun replied that God forbid. In that case, she should have called a priest as soon as possible to remove the evil from this man. "No," said Wald, and explained that if the magic was removed by force, he would die. Forbidden magic is usually destroyed after the death of the magician, or with the help of the power of a holy miracle. The nun said that the saint had not been seen in the world for over 100 years. Wald put a bag of coins in her hands and said that he would definitely remove this magic from him, but for now, he would entrust this man to the monastery, since he would be safe here. He promised to return again, but now he rode away on horseback, protected from the weather only by a hooded cloak. Wald remembered this man well. When he himself was a child, he was caring and considerate with him. Now Wald felt sad about what had happened to this man. After some time, he returned to the mansion. An excited Theo rushed towards the Duke. He greeted Duke Wald and asked where the head butler, Oscar, was. The Duke replied that he was now under protection. Theo realized that something had happened. Wald assured him that he would continue the investigation. Theo said that after Mr. Wald had a good rest, he should go and see Mr. Leon, because the boy was very bored being alone. These words surprised Wald, because he thought that the boy felt better when he was not at home. Theo explained that this was not the case at all. He even drew a duke on page B in his notebook with his favorite things. Theo didn't bother to clarify that the emphasis there was clearly on the horse. Since this meant that for Mr. Leon the Duke was part of the family, Theo offered to arrange a family meal for the boy. Wald asked who Leon usually ate with, apparently with his tutor. Theo said that it seemed to have been a tradition in the Duke's family for a long time. When everyone in the family gathers around the table, chatting and laughing, the food tastes better. Wald thought about these words. Adira and the boy actually usually ate together at a large table. Adira asked how Mr. Leon was enjoying his training and if he was too tired. Leon replied that learning defensive magic was absolutely fun. Then the boy became sad. He remembered that Mr. Wald was at work today too. Adira thought that his feelings were understandable. The boy found a way to cheer her up, but she was sure that Leon was most worried about Wald leaving him again. That's why he's still so downcast. Suddenly, Mr. Wald, wearing a white suit, appeared on the threshold of the dining hall. Adira rose from the table to curtsy and greet the Duke. Leon remained sitting at the table at first, but became very agitated. Then he finally stood up to perform the greeting according to all the rules. Wald sank down on the floor next to him so he could look the boy in the face and said, "Thank you." Adira thought with delight that Leon had handled the greeting as expected. Theo asked with a happy smile if it was okay to serve food. Leon and Adira realized that the Duke was going to sit at the table and eat with them. "Sit down," said Wald, and said that today they would have a family meal. Leon grabbed his teacher in surprise. The mention of a family meal stirred Adira's memories. In her parents' house, she was also sometimes invited to the table. But Adira was very afraid and could do nothing about it. Leon, too, was very nervous at the thought of eating with the Duke, but Adira could see that it was a joyful excitement. Indeed, Leon had waited so long for Wald to return. Now he should have been very happy, so the girl helped him sit down at the table. Then Adira looked at the Duke. Under his icy gaze, she said that since a family meal was being held here, she would probably leave. A look of despair appeared on Leon's face. The boy rushed to Adira, persuading her to stay. Adira thought that she shouldn't stay here because she was only a governess and Wald wouldn't allow it, but Leon looked at her with such hope. The Duke ordered her to sit down. Adira did not believe him and even asked again if he was sure. Wald said it was Leon's wish. Adira was very surprised that the Duke was trying to fulfill his nephew's wishes. She thanked him and sat down next to Leon, who was absolutely delighted. They looked at each other and smiled. The Duke looked at them, but from the cold expression on his face, as always, nothing could be understood. Meals in the Duke's house were served with a full set of cutlery. They ate in concentrated silence. Adira didn't even understand what to talk about with each other. Finally, she decided to talk about the fact that the Duke had recently returned from a long trip. She wished him a good rest after this journey. Adira also said that Mr. Leon was eagerly awaiting the Duke's return, which greatly embarrassed the boy. Adira looked at him and reported on the progress he was making in defensive magic. She said that Leon would soon become a master, as he turned out to be a very hard-working student. "Is that so?" the Duke asked again, looking up. He did not say another word, although the boy looked at him with hope. Adira thought that it was all rather awkward. The Duke was too silent. Something had to be done. At least some topic of conversation had to be thought of. Adira looked at Wald with a smile and said that Mr. Leon had recently created a book where he drew his favorite things. It was imperative to clarify how good the boy was at drawing. Then Adira asked if Mr. Wald himself had a favorite thing, but he replied that he didn't think so. Theo intervened and said that everyone knew that Mr. Wald's favorite thing was chess. The butler said that the Duke even made the chessboard himself, and it is now considered a high-quality work of art. It was interesting to learn that Wald had golden hands, and Adira said that she also loved chess. She asked if he organized tournaments with anyone. Theo explained that Mr. Wald always plays with himself, thereby strengthening his skills. Adira imagined the Duke playing chess against himself. Previously, she also went into this game head-on and played alone, and if she had time, she silently played with herself on the phone. It was nostalgia. Adira approached Leon and suggested that he, too, learn to play chess when he grew up a little. Meanwhile, Leon had completely eaten the pumpkin that was served for lunch. Leon even drew it in his notebook for the right letter. Adira laughed at the memory. Suddenly, the boy grabbed her, as if he was afraid of something. It was because of the Duke, who was looking straight at them. Wald handed him a small plate with 2 slices. Leon grabbed the teacher in bewilderment. "Here, eat," Wald said to the boy. "Thank you very much," Leon said, and Adira thought he had cut the pumpkin into small pieces to make it easier to eat. It was just unclear how Wald knew that Leon loved pumpkin. One could only assume that he was reading a book with his favorite things. Leon began to eat the pumpkin slices that Wald had placed on his plate. The Duke watched the boy closely. Leon noticed his gaze but continued chewing. Adira tried to understand why Valda was looking so intently at her nephew. He had completely embarrassed him. The butler approached the Duke and whispered something in his ear. Wald looked at Leon again. Then he rose from the table under the surprised glances of Adira and Leon. He told them to continue eating without him as he was going to return to his work. Adira wished him luck in this work. She thought that Wald came here while there was a break in his work. Leon looked at the remaining slices on his plate. He wondered if Mr. Wald liked pumpkin. He ate it, and that's probably why Mr. Wald left. Adira thought with alarm that Leon thought it was his fault. She told the boy not to worry. Mr. Wald had simply returned to his important work. She was sure of it. Adira explained to the boy that the Duke gave him the pumpkin because he knew it was his favorite food, so Leon needed to eat more of it to grow big and strong. "Okay," the boy responded readily. He began to quickly devour the slices from his plate. After dinner, Adira changed the boy into his pajamas and said that he had eaten well and now he could sleep. The lion's cap and toys lay nearby on the bed. Adira bid Leon goodnight affectionately. The boy suddenly looked at the teacher. He wanted to ask her something. In a sleepy voice, Leon told her that he wanted to become friends with Mr. Wald. He asked if the Duke would come to watch him during the trial by scale. Adira thought that if Leon had entered the academy, she wouldn't have to worry about being executed, and she would have left here with a clear conscience. It was simply impossible to close your eyes to something like this, she thought, looking tenderly at the boy who was already falling asleep. She herself grew up not understanding what it meant to receive love from a family, so she wants Leon to feel warm feelings in this house. Great, he thought. She would have to try hard. It would all be for Leon's smile. It was very dark. Only the moonlight streamed through the large window of the room, and the weak flame of the candles on the walls also could not completely dispel the gloom. The Duke was lying on the couch, and the girl with pink hair somehow ended up sitting on top of him. Wald said he never thought she would try to light a fire in him. He asked what she was trying to achieve. Their faces were very close to each other. They looked into each other's eyes. A little earlier, Adira knocked on the door of the Duke's room. Standing at the door, she loudly asked Mr. Wald for forgiveness for coming so late. The Duke opened the door and asked what she needed. Adira replied that she needed to talk to him about Mr. Leon. Wald said that it would be better to do it tomorrow. Adira thought that even today he left right from their shared meal. She had no guarantee that tomorrow he would even be home. Adira stated that she understood that the Duke was very busy during the day, so she asked him to give her some time right now. Wald looked at her carefully, and she thought she had been very careful in her words. She said that the Duke himself could see that she was completely disarmed, and even the pendant that sealed magic also prevented the girl from using it. Adira even offered the Duke to search her himself if that was his wish. "Come in," said the Duke, stepping back from the threshold. Adira was very happy, but still apologized for the intrusion. The Duke sat down on the couch. Adira stood in front of him and said that she wanted to report something. She happily reported that Mr. Leon's training in defensive magic was going smoothly. "I understand," Wald said gloomily, adding that Adira could go. The girl was surprised that he tried to send her away right away. Wald asked if she had anything else to tell him. Adira simply thought that he himself would ask more about how Leon spends his days. When Wald said they would have a family meal, she was absolutely sure that the Duke wanted to get closer to Leon, but it seemed like he only did it because it was necessary. Adira was worried about what would happen to Leon, who was so happy with the pumpkin he received from Wald. And yet, the girl understood. Leon really wanted to be friends with the Duke. It would be inappropriate for a simple governess to ask the gentleman to befriend the boy, so it was necessary to think of how best to begin this conversation. Adira thought hard, choosing the right words. Suddenly an idea struck her, and she invited Mr. Wald to arrange a chess match with her. The Duke looked at her questioningly. The girl suggested doing this if she wins, then Wald will listen to one of her requests. Adira couldn't understand the expression on Wald's face. The Duke said that he had no intention of playing chess with her. Adira suggested that he imagined that this would be his respite. Why not play chess with someone once in a while? Duels are so much fun. Wald objected that he did not need any breaks at all. Adira slyly asked if Wald didn't want to try out his seasoned skills. She assumed that the Duke was simply afraid of losing to her. Valda was very surprised by the idea that he could lose to a girl. Adira stated that she was also confident in her own strength, so no matter how skilled Wald was, she was not going to lose. She suggested checking which of them was stronger, and in the heat of the moment, the girl did not notice how she tripped over the hem of her own skirt. Adira lost her balance and began to fall. It so happened that she fell right on the Duke. "I'm in trouble," thought the girl. The Duke remarked darkly that he hadn't even thought she would try to light a fire in him, and then asked what she was trying to achieve. Adira pulled away from him and sat down, folding her hands in her lap with a feeling of guilt. She said she got too carried away, but maybe she shouldn't have said that and needed to come up with a different strategy. Adira turned away and said that then she would probably go to her room. "Stop," said the Duke, holding the girl by the shoulder. He made her turn around and, looking into her eyes, declared that he accepted her choice. They moved behind the chessboard. The Duke looked at her thoughtfully. Adira had never had the chance to look at Vala up close before, so she had never really thought about it before. She didn't even notice how handsome his face was, so handsome that he could play the leading male role in some movie. Wald said that it was her turn to go, and Adira realized that she had been lost in thought for several moments without noticing it. She looked at the board again, trying to figure out if she should take his pawn or if Wald was just baiting her. The Duke looked at the girl and smiled faintly. Adira belonged to the family of Count Sasha. They have always been middle-class aristocrats, situated between the imperialist and aristocratic factions. And the investigation into the reasons why they so suddenly sent their daughter to work as a governess had not yet ended, so now, depending on the situation, nothing prevents them from turning away from the Grand Duke's family at any moment. They had to be more vigilant. But her treatment of Leon may also have been just a setup to mislead everyone. If she is that cunning woman, then she can pretend under the guise of love. However, it was obvious how desperately she wanted to defeat Wald now. But what this woman wanted in general was unclear. Wald agreed to her challenge in order to find the answer to this question, but he still did not understand what she was thinking. It was the first time Wald had seen such a person. It was the Duke's turn to move, and he removed another girl's piece from the board. Adira realized with sadness that he had struck her very easily. "What do you want?" Wald suddenly asked. The girl replied that she had not won yet, but Wald noted that then he might never know the answer. Adira thought how impudent it was of her to challenge the gentleman to a chess match. Perhaps she would be fired regardless of whether she won or lost. But then Leon's desire will never reach Wald. He reacted to the duel, but then it would be better to tell him directly why she came here. Adira said that she wants the Duke to come support Lord Leon during the scale test. Wald realized that the girl had not meant her desire at all. They continued playing, wondering who should let whom escape, since there were only 3 pieces left, and if this continued, they would have to give up the game. "Mr. Wald, please," said Adira. The last move had to be decisive. Since it was going this way, Adira was ready to be fired, but even then she would like to come to the test of scales at the end. Adira's cheeks turned red and she grabbed her face with her hands. "What?" Wald asked. Did he want to know what the girl didn't like? She didn't understand why he did it that way because he could have won against her with this move. But after that, he continued to play with her, as if passing on his victory to her. The Duke handed the girl a sealed envelope. He told Adira to open it. Opening the envelope, Adira saw that it was an invitation letter from the Academy. The girl read this invitation more carefully. It turned out that Wald had planned from the very beginning to come and support Mr. Leon. Adira realized that she should have simply asked him about it from the very beginning, but this meant that Wald was at least a little interested in Leon, although his behavior could have been caused by the duty he was obliged to fulfill. Adira said that Mr. Leon was very excited by the idea that the Duke would come to see him. She asked him to support the boy with all his might during the exam. Because she herself would not be able to come, the viewing area is only allocated to family members. But Wald objected that she would go too. Leon looked very calm when his governess was next to him. In order for him to pass this test, Adira had to come to support the boy. Adira beamed with joy and said that she would root for Mr. Leon with all her might. Wald looked at the girl with surprise. And then the time filled with everyday worries flew by. Leon was sewn a suit suitable for the test. Adira prepared the appropriate equipment for him. On the day of the scale test, a crew was waiting for them in front of the porch. The Duke, dressed in his ceremonial uniform, asked them if they were ready. "Yes," answered Adira and Leon, who was holding her hand tightly, in one voice. Leon was surprised when Wald picked him up in his arms. "Then let's go," said the Duke, looking at the boy. He put him straight into the carriage. After this, Valda extended his hand to Adira herself. The girl did not show her excitement, but readily accepted the help. "Forward," said Wald, seating her in the carriage. Soon the carriage set off. They sat silently opposite each other. Wald looked out the window at the road. Leon kept his gaze on Wald. Adira thought that the boy was still terribly nervous when he was around the Duke. But today was the day of the scale test, so they needed to somehow help Leon relax and demonstrate the strength they had been practicing in training. The girl had an idea, and Adira suggested that Leon look out the window. "Look," she said, pointing to the birds that seemed to be catching up with their carriage. "Wow," Leon exclaimed, Adira adding that she was sure they had come to support him. The birds actually seemed to wish Leon good luck, and the boy happily shouted thank you to them. The boy confessed to the teacher that this was the first time he had traveled so far from the mansion. Adira realized that Leon had never traveled beyond the distant confines of the palace. This was evident in his shining eyes. He did not know what they were seeing in front of them. And outside the window you could see the sea, and Adira explained that it was a place where many fish live. The boy looked at the sea and the coast as if enchanted. The Duke, watching him, looked thoughtful. And now the road was behind them. They found themselves in the hall of the scale test. The ladies in the hall were whispering. They were discussing one of the gentlemen present. They didn't even think that they would accidentally meet him. It was a man with long white hair, the chief priest of the Church of St. Lunarius, Jonas Bacchum. Also present in this hall were the head teacher and the director of the Albarian Empire Academy. Ralph Blank, a teacher of pharmacological botany, stood to one side, overwhelmed by the number of aristocrats gathered there. Suddenly, someone pushed him. This person said that it was about to start. He was clearly happy about this and wanted everything to happen faster. And Ralph Blanky asked Sir Ladora not to shout and not to lean on him, please. Dolado Doladora was a teacher of transformation and was very interested in what kind of children were gathered this year. Wald, Adira, and Leon also joined the crowd. It was surprisingly lively here, but this celebration took place only once a year. One man politely called out to the Duke, and Wald said he would step away for a minute. "Okay," said Adira, adding that they would wait for him. Leon clutched Adira's clothes in horror. Because there were so many people around, the boy began to become very nervous. Adira lowered herself so that she was on the same level as Leon. She drew the boy's attention to the fact that there were many children standing to the side who were about the same age as Leon. Adira said that they are all Leon's future comrades who are also willing to undergo the test. Perhaps they can all become friends. Leon really liked the idea of making friends, and Adira thought that if he could make friends, she would be at ease for him at the academy. He just needed some excuse for Leon to talk to the kids who were here today. Registration was announced, and until Mr. Wald returned, it was possible to register at the counter. While Adira filled out the necessary paperwork, Leon looked around. Leon thought about his friends. He didn't know if he could make friends with people the same way he did with Cerberus and the squirrel. He didn't know which guys he would be better off talking to. At that moment, Leon noticed a boy with bright red hair walking past. This boy had large gray eyes and light clothes, as well as a gold ornament with a shining sapphire. The boy's gray eyes looked at Leon. Leon was absolutely delighted. This unknown boy was so cool, everything about him was shiny, just like Mr. Wald. But the boy turned around and walked away. Leon plucked up his courage and rushed after him, but immediately collided with some adult. "Sorry," he muttered, embarrassed. The man he pushed looked at him and asked if he was from Cheyenne by any chance, and if he was going to take the test today. Leon looked at him. He didn't know who this man was. The stranger leaned over to him and said that he was his father's older cousin, and then asked if he really didn't even remember the faces of his relatives. He himself, as soon as he saw Leon, immediately understood everything. This stupid face was exactly the same as his father's. The stranger was glad that such a fool could be a black background for his bright and outstanding son. Leon didn't understand why this uncle was angry with him. Maybe it happened because the boy bumped into him, but it happened by accident. The stranger noticed that Leon probably didn't understand anything he was telling him anyway. He said that Leon was a good-for-nothing boy. Leon was struck in the heart by these words, because many of his previous teachers had said the same thing. He again felt lonely, unhappy, and incapable of anything. "I would advise you to watch your words," a familiar voice suddenly said very close. Adira hurried to come up and cover Leon with herself. By that time, bitter tears had already appeared in the boy's eyes. The stranger asked who she was. Adira replied that she was Mr. Leon's governess and demanded that he immediately stop humiliating her student. Adira, in the eyes of a stranger, looked too young to be a tutor. She couldn't understand anything about teaching anyway. She would play around and then leave them. The stranger suggested that she also had a lot of problems with this boy, who would never be able to enter the academy anyway, and Wald is probably suffering with such a troublesome child. The stranger reminded the frightened Leon that if he failed today's test, he would be kicked out immediately. Adira turned to the boy with an encouraging smile and asked his forgiveness for making him wait for her for so long. "Let's go," she told him, and turned to lead Leon away from here. But the stranger shouted at her back that she should not dare to leave, calling her an impudent girl who decided to ignore him. Adira replied that she had no need to listen to his speeches. Words that had no hint of logic meant nothing to her more than the buzzing of a mosquito. Whether this man was really a relative or not, the girl did not know, but she understood that she would not allow anyone to hurt Leon, so she looked at the stranger again and declared that Mr. Leon was a very kind and hard-working man, and Mr. Wald took great care of this boy in his free time. Adira demanded that the stranger not dare to speak so confidently about something he knew nothing about. Leon looked at her, and the tears in his eyes began to dry. The stranger got angry and grabbed the girl by the wrist, asking who she was. He declared that some governess did not dare to object to him. Now it was clear to him why no one would take her as a wife. She had no right to be arrogant just because she was a woman. At that moment, Wald approached and called out to them. The Duke asked the stranger what he was doing. The stranger was still holding Adira, and on the other side, a frightened Leon was clinging to the girl. "Wald!" the stranger exclaimed in surprise and asked where he came from. Wald noted that Brother Werner had not changed and took a step towards his relative. He grabbed Werner by the arm and forced him away from Adira. Wald said that if Werner had something to say to him, he could listen to it. Werner screamed not to be touched and broke free. He was surprised that Wald had come for this boy, because if so, then he had created trouble for himself. "So what?" the Duke asked gloomily. "Damn it!" Werner cursed, looking down. He turned and walked away, his son running after him. "What?" Adira screamed, but the Duke's hand blocked her way. She looked at Wald, behind whose shoulder she found herself, and their eyes met. People around noticed what was happening, and now everyone was looking at them. This was bad. Adira lowered her eyes and asked the Duke for forgiveness for interfering where she shouldn't have. Perhaps it would have been better for her to take it indifferently, but she was so angry that she didn't see anyone around her. Wald replied that she didn't need to apologize. Adira was surprised that the Duke for some reason wasn't angry with her. In the crowd, you could even see a man with a light braid, the high priest. People were whispering about what happened. No one knew, but everyone saw that everything seemed to have calmed down. Mr. Jonesh also came over to find out what had happened. Adira, meanwhile, apologized to Leon for leaving him alone. She looked at the boy and understood how scared he was. Leon sobbed and, wiping away his tears, said that the teacher was not to blame. He also asked for forgiveness from Mr. Wald for the fact that he was not capable of anything in this life. Bowing his head, he promised that he would try his best, just so long as he wasn't kicked out. Adira looked at the boy with concern. The boy took the words of that stranger so close to his heart. Wald knelt down in front of the boy and called him by name. He wiped away his tears and said that he had never once considered him a good-for-nothing boy. Leon continued to cry and said that all he does is lose and let everyone down. Adira hastened to assure him that this was not at all the case, because she had never seen such a hard-working person as Leon. Even if he loses, he keeps trying until he wins. Adira believed that Leon has a very brave and valiant heart. Wald also told him that he was doing a good job, and when the boy incredulously asked if this was true, Adira and Wald unanimously said yes, of course. They looked at each other questioningly. At this moment, an announcement was made that the scale test was about to begin, and all participants were asked to come to the reception area. It seemed like it had already started, so Adira took Leon's hand. She said that he, as well as Mr. Wald and she, were one. Now they just had to try together. They all joined their hands together. Wald looked closely at Adira. Leon's eyes were completely excited and even scared. He really believed the words of his teacher and Mr. Wald, and their support was very important to him. Wald leaned towards Leon and whispered that when the test was over, Adira didn't hear the rest of the sentence, but she liked that the two had some kind of shared secret. Mr. Wald and Leon looked into each other's eyes attentively. They clearly understood each other. Adira thought that everything was fine. It seemed that now any business would go smoothly. She cheerfully suggested that Leon go and change in the reception area. Wald looked at them with a slight smile. They went into the reception area of the scale testing room. There were still a lot of people there. Children were running between groups of adults. Leon was fully prepared for his first test. He changed into a suit specially made for this. Adira admired how cool he was and asked if he had forgotten anything. Leon put on his cap, a helmet on top of it, and took the sword of Teacher Adira. Adira approved that the boy had everything he needed with him, and the specially made sword that she made at night was part of the secret method. But just recently, Wald shouted at her that she was joking, because such a method would only disgrace Leon. Adira knew that it would be completely different because they had practiced a lot for today. She assured Leon that he could handle it, because the most important thing was to work hard, honestly and conscientiously. Leon looked at her with his huge eyes. Wald said that he must remember that no matter what happens, that mansion is his place, so he must be calm and focused on the test. Leon looked at the Duke very attentively for a moment. Yes, the boy said enthusiastically. Now he was ready to go. Adira and Wald looked at him with pride. So the test of scales, which everyone had been waiting for so long, began. Now everyone wanted to know which of the kids gathered here today would be able to earn the right to enter the academy this year. The rules were simple. All you had to do was get a dragon scale by any means possible. Leon was simply amazed when he saw this dragon. He thought he had to try. Other children noticed him and even asked his name. The red-haired boy stood ahead of everyone in his sparkle. Leon decided that he should come closer and even tried to call out to him. But the boy turned to him angrily. He said that Leon should not address him so casually, especially before the start of the competition. It was very rude. Leon muttered to be forgiven for this. He tried to explain that he just wanted to talk. The red-haired boy asked with disdain what kind of costume Leon was wearing, because they were not on a playground, their future was at stake here. The red-haired boy said that he had absolutely nothing to say to someone who did not take the matter seriously. From the spectator's seat next to her, Adira, her hands pressed to her chest with excitement, watched Leon's situation. It seems there was a quarrel between him and this boy. Adira couldn't hear anything from here. At that moment, Wald's hand fell on her shoulder, asking her to calm down. He assured her that Leon was fine, she didn't need to worry about him. Adira had to agree that he was right. Leon raised his hand and exclaimed that he didn't come here to play games. He was serious like everyone else, because he wanted Lord Wald and Adira's teacher to see how hard he was trying. But the red-haired boy replied that he had had enough of chatting with weaklings. He stated that he would show Leon the difference in strength between them. He would now undergo a test. The boy turned around and left. Leon watched him go, wondering what he might have meant when he said something about weaklings. Meanwhile, they were ordered to line up in one line. The children couldn't help but whisper to each other. But then a dragon appeared before them and let out its triumphant roar. The children were scared, and someone pushed Leon and he fell to the ground. None of the children wanted to be the first. Everyone hoped that someone else would volunteer. "Come on, dragon," a voice sounded very close to Leon. "I will be your first rival," the man said to the dragon. The red-haired boy stood between the fallen Leon and the dragon. But the fight didn't last long. Soon the red-haired boy was already flying head over heels. The hostess announced that the test was over. The red-haired boy could not simply believe it, that he had suffered such a failure. The audience began to whisper that the boy from a noble family had failed, even though he had the best teachers. The teachers discussed how this year should have been easier than last year, but Ladora overdid it. Adira saw that the child seemed to be okay, but she was still terribly nervous, after which the son of the man with whom Adira had argued flew away to the ground. "Seriously?" his father cried, clutching his hair with both hands. Well, the stewards announced before anyone had passed. In the midst of the chaos stood the next student, Lord Leon Schwarzschild. The Schwarzschild duchy was immediately whispered about again, with people mentioning that it was a cursed family, the same one from which the terrible Duke Wald came. Adira quickly shouted so that Lord Leon would have no doubt that they were with him. The boy clearly heard her voice. He thought of his teacher Adira and Duke Wald and became stern. Leon took a step towards the test and grabbed the hilt of his sword. "Forward," he cried, and drew forth a strange blade crowned with a pom-pom. The audience couldn't understand what it was. Maybe it was some kind of brush, it was unclear what he was going to do with it. Wald said he believed in Leon. Adira could only agree with this. The reason Leon was bad at handling weapons and combat magic was because he felt sad at the thought of hurting living beings. And kind-hearted Leon came up with the perfect plan, which consisted of a secret technique. The technique was called nose tickling, and Leon began practicing it thoroughly. When Adira made this sword, she told Leon that with this sword he would be able to obtain the dragon scale without harming it. She even showed how exactly to tickle the dragon's nose. Leon listened to her with attentive surprise. He did not understand why she was doing this. Adira explained that if the dragon's nose itched, it would slow down, giving Leon a chance to easily get the scale from his neck. Leon worriedly asked if it would hurt the dragon, but Adira assured him that it definitely wouldn't hurt to just tickle him. There was absolutely nothing wrong with it. Then the dragon had to sneeze. That's what happened during the test. But Leon blocked the fire with his defensive magic. Adira, who had been watching this closely, exclaimed triumphantly that it had worked. But the next moment she thought that Leon needed to be careful. The dragon continued to breathe fire and wriggle. The other children started running away from him. But Leon called them all to come back here. He covered the entire company with a protective dome. All the children were hidden in a magic bubble. Adira and Wald watched the events in the arena with excitement. Adira thought it was absolutely amazing that he was able to protect everyone. Now he just had to hold on. Leon jumped on the dragon's face. Adira noted that her tree-climbing training had finally paid off. She shouted that everything was great, that Leon would definitely be able to do everything. Leon reached the scales on the back of his neck. They were so shiny. The boy held on to the dragon's neck quite deftly. "Ah!" Leon suddenly exclaimed. His foot slipped and he fell off the dragon. Adira jumped up from her seat and covered her mouth with her hands in excitement. Lord Leon was falling and there was no way to stop it. A couple of days ago, they were training in the garden with Kenny's help, and it was going really well. Adira was pleased to think that he had finally figured it all out. His magical defense against the dragon's sneeze was flawless. But more importantly, everything that happened next was, the dragon's scales were very slippery. It was easy to slip and fall. The arena's security systems should have worked immediately, but it was better to be prepared for the worst. If Leon could instantly summon the sphere, but he wouldn't be able to. If he ran out of mana, then it would be difficult for him to land safely. The squirrel jumped onto Adira's shoulder. He slyly pointed his paw at the cat that was stretching nearby on the lawn. The cat glanced at them suspiciously and narrowed one eye. Adira thought that she would have to teach Leon the secret of a safe landing. The secret was to relax your body as you fell to soften the impact of landing. That's exactly what Leon did now, feeling the support of his friends who believed that he could do it, and therefore he shouldn't be afraid. "Okay," Leon told them. He tried his best to group himself as he had been taught. Then he rolled over onto all fours, imitating a cat and even meowed. The spectators watched the arena with bated breath, but it was completely hidden by clouds of dust. Adira could only think about Leon at that moment. At this time, Leon was tightly clutching the treasured dragon scale in his hand. He raised his hand triumphantly above his head, demonstrating to everyone what he had managed to obtain. "We did it!" Adira cried, clutching Wald's hand with both hands. The Duke looked at the girl with great surprise. At this time, the children in the arena looked with delight at the dragon scales that fell from the sky. Now each of them could get a dragon scale. The red-haired boy looked at them with a strange look. He saw Leon rejoicing at his unexpected success. "Wow," said the academy teacher. "The dragon's sneeze caused scales to fall off, and now everyone is picking them up." He turned to the director and asked what they should do now. "The rules say that whoever gets the scale will be allowed to take the entrance exam to the academy, or something like that." The head teacher noted that even if the children had lifted them from the ground, they had no choice. They had to admit them all. Such was the director's will, which meant that the entrance exam this year would be extremely hectic. The red-haired boy stood with his head bowed before his parents, who told him that he had been taught better than everyone else. The same red-haired man reproached the boy for simply going and losing, even though he was the heir. "I'm sorry, father," the boy replied guiltily. "Your training will be taken care of by others," the man said, turning to the woman standing nearby. Leon watched this scene from behind the corner. The red-haired boy noticed him and asked if he had come to laugh at him. "No," Leon answered him. He said that fighting fair and giving it your all was what was really important. That's what his teacher Adira had taught him. Leon said that the red-haired boy was really cool when he stood in front of the dragon first. The red-haired boy looked at Leon with a very surprised look. With a joyful smile, Leon handed him the dragon scale. The red-haired boy looked at this scale in someone else's palm with surprise. Then he took it in his hands and brought it closer to his eyes. His father told him that he would not accept anything lower than first place, since he had to defend the honor of the family. It was completely abnormal for a red-haired boy to not be first in something. This is what he said to Leon, who was very surprised by such words. At that moment, Wald and Adira found the children and came closer. Lord Wald, Adira's teacher, Leon shouted loudly, attracting the attention of everyone around. The parents of the red-haired boy thought that it could not be that this little boy in the lion's cap was the son of a duke. This knowledge made me look at Leon with completely different eyes. The red-haired boy's father made his son bow and apologized for his rudeness towards Leon. Wald asked Leon if this child was his friend. Leon looked at the red-haired boy carefully and intently. There was something incomprehensible in his gray eyes. But Leon beamed, and Adira beamed with him. For the first time, Leon had a friend. The red-haired boy approached Leon and, with his head bowed, asked for forgiveness for what he had said, because he had managed to say so many stupid things. Leon replied that he was grateful that the red-haired boy spoke to him. He really wanted to meet him again at the entrance exams. The red-haired boy finally said his name. His name was Emilio. Leon grabbed his new friend by the hand and loudly shouted his name. Adira looked at the children with absolute affection. Then Emilio left with his parents. Leon waved goodbye to him with a happy look. "Lord Leon," they called out to him, and he saw hands outstretched towards him. Adira picked the boy up in her arms and said that it was so brave to protect everyone with that spell. She hugged Leon tightly and remarked that his cat landing looked absolutely amazing. She asked if he was hurt, and Leon replied that he was perfectly fine. He laughed happily as he hugged Adira. Wald watched their joy from the sidelines. Then the Duke came closer and stroked the boy on the head. He looked him in the eye and said it was a job well done. Mr. Wald's approving gaze was very close. Leon could look him straight in the eye, and it made him very excited. He was absolutely happy because Wald had picked him up and praised him, and now they would go home together. The audience was discussing how the young master from the Duke's family had become the real star of the trials this year, and the Duke's relative heard everyone calling this boy special. And so the scale test ended in resounding success, Adira later said in Wald's mansion. The butler, Theo, who came out to congratulate Leon, burst into tears of emotion. "You've passed," Wald said to Adira as they sat across from each other in his office late one evening. The girl thought it was like an internship for a job. She thanked the Duke for his trust, and Wald said that he was now officially appointing Adira as a teacher. He wrote something on a piece of paper and asked the girl what she thought about such a sum as payment. Then he showed her what he had written. Adira couldn't believe she was seeing these numbers. The Duke's wealth was on a completely different level. Adira had never seen such money in her life. She beamed and said that it was a great honor for her, and she humbly accepted it. The Duke said that she would live here, and therefore could transport anything she wanted. The girl replied that everything was fine. Everything she had was already here. She heard surprise in the Duke's voice when he remembered that the girl had arrived here with one suitcase. Wald simply could not believe that the Count's daughter had such baggage. He thought seriously, remembering what state Adira had been in all these days. He saw the dress she was wearing when she walked with Leon in the garden, and also the costume in which the girl studied with the boy in the house. Wald noted that there were large temperature differences in the northern lands. Adira agreed that this was true, and said that she would like to knit mittens for Lord Leon. Wald said that in the winter some people get very cold, but Adira could not understand why he suddenly started talking about the weather. Wald hovered over her and said that it would be a shame for the teacher if Adira froze to death before the exam, so tomorrow they would go to the city of Everwine, and Adira would go with them. Adira thought about this trip. She knew something about this city of Evervine. This is the place Adira always dreamed of visiting.